probably the part of our body that is the least utilized in training is our mind, right?
Welcome to Karate Cafe, your source for martial arts conversations since 2005. And now, here's your hosts, Paul Wilson and Dan Williams.
Live. Hello again, everybody. It's Paul with another episode of Karate Cafe Live. And there's somebody's feedback. And off my center line, as always, is my good friend Dan Williams. Dan, how are you?
I am well, Paul. I think that's the extent of it. I'm well. I was gonna be more poetic about it, but I'm not a poet, so
And
there
you
it
didn't
is.
even know it.
I'm just well.
And off to Dan's center line, or my center line, or wherever it is on
It's
Zoom,
down
is our
here
good
for
friends.
me, but
Down here. It's over there for
might
me.
be up there.
He's here, he's there,
He's everywhere.
Andrew Adams, thanks for joining us. As we all know, he's the lifeblood of the Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio podcast, and we just thought we'd have him as a guest instructor today.
I don't know if I'm the lifeblood, but I'm definitely there.
Jeremy says it all the time, and I'm more than happy to keep on saying that.
If Dan is off your center line and I'm off Dan's center line, does that put me behind you?
By the transitive property, yes.
He is here. He is there. He is everywhere. I'm gonna.
Or it could be straight on your Ombison line. I'm right there, right in the middle, right in.
That's right.
Could be anywhere. All right. So I'm gonna open up. Actually, Dan, you open up the chat. You monitor the chat. I'm tired of monitoring the chat.
Okay, I'll do that.
You do that,
suckers.
Just in case we actually have a viewer today, which would be fantastic.
Viewers are overrated.
Yeah, or listener. I mean, they could just turn it off and listen. Don't listen to him. Anybody? No comments yet. Anyway, we wanted to talk today. We have our topic, as you were. I call it missing the mark, or the regretful Ronin. And what is basically I call it missing the mark, or the regretful.
My bad.
It wasn't me.
Sorry about that. I have to monitor the chat, and I didn't have the volume turned down.
Not ever. We'll talk to the tech team here at the Massive Karate Cafe studio about kind of aging in the martial arts. I actually had a conversation with a internationally known podcaster whose name I won't drop because I'm getting ready to talk about how you're talking about how I'm modifying our workouts to kind of match what's going on. And as a martial artist, I started when I was 17 or whatever. And I feel like I'm starting to miss a step. And as a martial artist and an instructor and whatnot, I'm kind of dealing with that personally of like, the realization that my adamantium has been stripped and my mutant healing powers are not what they once were. Thoughts?
I mean, here's the reality. There are very few things that you can always consistently count on in life, and one of them is getting older. Right? It's gonna happen to. I mean, unless you're gonna die right away, like you're gonna.
Or Benjamin Button.
You're gonna get older. Yeah. So I think all of us, to some degree, whether we have gone through it or not, or whether we have gone through it yet or not, are gonna understand exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I know that. I know that for me, it's really the recovery process that is the most unfamiliar to me, right? Like it's the sneakiest one, because I don't know. I can still kick pretty high. I can my flexibility isn't really hurt much. My stamina is not nearly what it used to be. But at the same time, I don't really push it on a regular basis. I mean, I know that there are classes in the world where they push you to, you know, your limits with every class, but that's not often the case for most classes, right? And so it is when I get pushed to those limits, the rare times where I go, oof, I just don't have the gas I used to have. And I think the recovery is really the biggest factor for me. I I took Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 3 months. And one of the things that, I don't know, concerned me at least is the amount of injuries that those guys seem to sustain. Which makes sense. I mean, if you're rolling constantly for like half the class or whatever, then you will get broken fingers. You will get hurt. You know, it's just what happens. And I think for me that recovery time and the amount of recovery required, like I fell on my skateboard like a year ago and my knee still hurts, right? Like if I had done that at 20, I'd have probably popped back up and just kept going and wouldn't even have thought about it.
Rub some motion on it and off you go.
Right? Yeah. But yeah, I think recovery time is a big one. I mean, obviously your speed slows down for sparring and things like that. I think that I don't know. I don't think instruction is that heavily affected by it unless you're unable to do the technique you're trying to
Well,
demonstrate.
yeah, I mean, because that was one of the things that we talked about before is like, I was watching an instructor. Was a Kyokushin guy? Yeah, it was a Kyokushin instructor, and it was some like devastating, spinny sort of kick. That they
That they
destroyed
devastated
people
someone
with.
with?
Yes, that they destroyed back when they were like doing the 100-man kumite, blah 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 blah. And they were an older instructor, and they're like, so like I'm going to tell you how to do it, but
Right.
I can't really do it.
Hmm.
And it's kind of one of those things is like, which is, kind of the other topic we were going to talk about this week, we'll push off to next week, is like, if it's a technique that you can't do anymore, it's like
Hmm.
it is a technique for a young person to do. It's
Right.
like, as a martial artist, as someone who's perpetuating your system and stuff like that, is that something you go like, I'm not going to stress that much because
Right.
that's not there for the long run. But that's what they were known for. So, when we talk about in our system and in our lineage, like Tohan Soken was like still teaching at 90.
Yeah.
And, well, I see videos of him of like when he was in the 70s and 80s, and he moves like an old guy. I mean, because he's an old guy. Moves probably better than that. And we see videos all the time of, like the intangible assets of cultural and intangible cultural assets in Okinawa, of these Okinawan masters that are, you'll see some are, they're in their 70s and 80s
Hmm.
and plus, and they're doing kata. And some of them you go like, he's moving like a 80-year-old person.
Yep.
And then some of
Yep.
them you go like, wow, that's an 80-year-old person.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
and the analogy that I use and have used a lot is, if anyone is at all, if anyone's not familiar, I'll explain it really briefly. But Highland dancing, so Scottish Highland dancing, involves a
Okay.
lot of jumping on one foot, right? A
Mhm.
lot of up and down. I'm not talking the Irish step dancing, the Michael Flatley Lord of the Dance thing, but Scottish Highland dancing
Noted
involves
martial artist.
lots of up and down on one foot. And there is a woman who is continually teaching the best competitors in Highland dancing. These Her students continually win world championships in Highland dancing. And she, as an instructor, was a very incredible competitive Highland dancer. She is now like 350, 400 pounds. She had some health issues and she gained a lot of weight. She's still consistently, her students are some of the best in the world. She cannot herself dance on jump on one foot anymore, but she's
Right.
continually producing students that can. So I think, without a doubt, if you are an instructor and you are limited in some way, that doesn't mean you can't still teach and still be an incredible teacher.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we had, I mean, way back, I think probably, well, not in the 20th century, but quite a while ago, 2 or 3 cities ago, we did an episode of, and I was kind of touching on this. It's kind of prescient to flash forward, almost 20 years. Um, we did a thing. This is like, are you Mickey or are you Rocky? It's like,
Right.
Rocky was a middling boxer, If you harken back to the beginning of the series, he was a middling boxer, and Mickey brought him up to what it was. Now Mickey was like a small dude. He was an old guy. He was deaf in one ear. You know,
Yep. Yep.
he couldn't catch the chicken. But he knew how to teach Rocky to catch the chicken. So I mean, he had been a boxer, but he wasn't a great boxer. And coaches that are not necessarily, well, NFL coaches and stuff like that. You see, some of these guys are not a paragon of physical perfection, but they're coaching teams of people that are physically able to do that. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's absolutely and so I guess part of that is like, yeah, you have to like grasp that and go like, okay, I can't do that anymore, but I can still show someone how to do
Yep.
that. And then like, so how
Well,
do you, mentally
I
put yourself in that place?
yeah, I think the important part really is to like admit and understand your own limitations, right?
Mhm.
Because I had um I see it more on seminars than anything else. You go to a seminar and the dude giving the seminar is like 80 years old. But they'll bring a couple of students with them and they will do the demonstration of the technique, right? And then when it's time to show it like in real time or as the practical demonstration or something like that, they'll have their two senior students do it. And
Sure.
so to
Yeah.
me, that's sort of like that's a recognition that they're at the point where they need to have someone do that, or it's you're not going to train others effectively. So I think that is the most important thing is that instructors are honest with themselves, because the risk would be, um, oh, I can't do that technique. I'm just going to not teach it anymore, right?
Yeah, and then you lose that.
And yeah, and then and I think that there's obviously many different philosophies of thought around that. Like, well, if you can't do it when you're old, why would you train in it when you're young? It's a part of the system, so it's historical to the lineage. Like you
Mhm.
have,
Mhm.
like regardless of why you're doing that, I think there's a risk in that to say that it could even be subconscious, right? To go, if you're shying away from this particular technique because every time you do it, it hurts your shoulder, right? Um, I know that for me, I got a lot of shoulder damage when I did Chisao because I was doing it wrong. Um, but I also have a tendency to kind of cringe away from Chisao a little bit because I know it's going to wreck my shoulder,
Mhm.
right? So as an instructor, you really have to be aware of those kinds of limitations to make sure that an old injury or whatever might be the case is limiting you, and therefore you're limiting your students because of that, right?
Yeah. Well, that's an important safety tip for those of you who have followed Saga Karate Cafe. Um, I had a health thing, and it was my shoulders, and like so, like doing break falls and doing so whatever. But like was riding bike with my son, and like my shoulders were killing me, and blah 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 blah. X-rays, yada yada yada. Uh, and it turns out that I had a blocked artery,
Oh,
Mhm.
so and it was cutting off the blood going to my shoulder area. However that the
yeah,
biology works. And anyway, but I thought it was because I jacked up my shoulders doing something, and
right.
and
That's what
but
you would assume. Yeah.
because it kicked off when I was doing a whole class on break
Hmm.
falls, and the next day I was just like, my shoulders are killing me,
Right.
and that was the tip of that iceberg of going in and getting stuff done, but I
Did you get five-finger death punched and like had medical intervention to avoid your heart exploding?
no, because it was more than five steps away, so I know it wasn't like anyone could touch me, Dan. Let's be.
Right,
I had to hurt myself. I had to
right.
clog my own artery. Um, but and so then that kind of tumbles into the next phase of what I want to talk about was like, if you are injured, yeah, you
Like
roll
me
the
right
same.
now.
What
Oh, you're injured now.
is that something topical? Oh, hey Gus, what's up? Gus Rogers just yeah, if you are injured, the road back, So yeah, Adam, why don't you, Andrew, why don't you tell us about your Scooby Doo?
So back in August of last year, I slipped. Not doing anything cool. I wish I had a really fun story, but I just slipped and sprained my ankle. That's all it was. I went in, it hurt immensely. I went in, I had an x-ray. I didn't break anything. I just had a bad sprain on my ankle. And so this was the middle of August. And as you know, there's not a ton you can do about a sprain. You just, it'll get better eventually. So I did nothing. I babied it because it hurt a little bit and my ankle got swollen. But I figured, it'll eventually get better. And it didn't get better. And so this was mid August. By, August, September, October, November, we're into December. My ankle is still swollen and it still hurts. It's not like debilitating, but it was painful if it twisted the right way. And I finally went in for a CAT scan, and a cyst had formed on the inside of my ankle between two of my bones.
Oh,
Yeah. Any medical people listening, it was between my tibia and my talus. And the cyst was growing, which was pushing my bones out of alignment, which was why my ankle was swollen, which is why it still hurt. So this was late December, early January. The reality was it wasn't going to get better. The cyst wasn't going to get smaller and go away. I medically had to have them go in and pull it out. So
ooh,
I had a planned medical procedure for them to go in and take this cyst out. And it was a very invasive procedure.
wow.
And so for 6 weeks, I couldn't put my foot on the ground.
Huh.
And that was so the surgery was February 12th. We're talking as of recording this, just over 3 months ago. I haven't been able to go to class because for 6 weeks I couldn't walk, first off. After 6 weeks, I could kind of walk, but it wasn't great. I'm now able to drive. I am upright and mobile, but I don't have full mobility. Like my foot is still numb. It's still tingly. I can move my toes, but I am not anywhere close to being ready to take part in a physical training class.
Mhm.
That does not mean that I haven't been training for the last 3.5 months.
Right. Yeah, that's that's, and there's another, the little adage we have in our dojo about, hitting like you're the coffee table. And it's like, the guy, you just hit at that right place. You did that right thing, and it,
Yep.
it took a couple months to take you out, but that's amazing. But so, how did that make you feel? Like, I'm just like, I'm gonna, when they told you the recovery time and the stuff like that.
The what I wish I so when I asked about the surgery, like I asked lots of questions about what they were going to do. And I don't know how into the surgery itself you want me to go into, but like it was a big deal. And they said, you'll be, what's the recovery like? They said, you'll be 6 weeks of non-weight bearing. And so in my brain, because this is the first major surgery, actually this is the first surgery ever. I mean, I've had teeth taken out. Like I've had my wisdom teeth out, but I don't count that. So
And
this
that
was the
explains it.
first surgery I had, first real serious injury from martial arts. So I didn't know what questions to ask. So when they said the recovery is going to be 6 weeks of
You're like, I'll be
non-weight
back
bearing,
in class in 6 weeks.
that's
Sweet.
exactly what
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah, I
Dan,
would have thought
I
the
know
same thing.
that's exactly what I thought. I thought,
Yeah.
oh, 6 weeks. All right. And so I sat down with my wife. We talked about, okay, I'm going to be out of work for, this 6 weeks because I'm not going to be able to leave the house.
Right.
Like, how am I going to make this work? But I'm like, okay, after 6 weeks though, and I actually could leave the house after a couple of weeks, but I couldn't walk. I could use crutches or a scooter or whatever. I still couldn't drive. So we
Mhm.
figured out how to make it work. And then like, all right, well, after 6 weeks, boom, I'll be back to quote unquote normal. Yeah, no, that's not how it works. And
Right.
obviously I recognize that now, but if anyone's listening who is going in for a planned surgery, recognize and ask the questions, what is the actual recovery going to be like? My foot might be
Right.
numb for another 6 to 9 months.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, so one of the things I thought of while you were telling that story was, I think especially since, oh, I'm old, UFC and things like that, people have gotten much more into reality-based self-defense. They've gotten much more into BJJ. They've gotten much more into MMA, and
Always.
I think there's a disdain for schools that either don't or very rarely spar.
Mhm.
And I think that one of the challenges with that is injuries, right? Because as you've experienced, one injury has cost you 9 months of not being able to train.
Mhm.
And while I think that if it's your profession, right, then those risks are risks that you might be willing to take. But if it's a hobby, you really like that is something that people should really, really consider in
Mhm.
that, right? Because I know for me, I type all day, right? I'm an office worker, and if I get these broken, I'm gonna have a really hard time at work. It may actually impact like income and things like that.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
so to say, well, you should be sparring every day in all of your classes or blah blah, like, I ain't got time for that.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
I
Well,
I don't want to do that.
there was a guy that Dan and I know, uh, that had a whole thing where, rough tough, where, and he said if nobody stops sparring until someone's bleeding, like we have these
Right,
Friday night fights where,
right.
we
Like the Dog Brothers or
yeah,
something, right?
it's like, okay, okay, bravo, you're a rough tough guy, but you
Right.
probably couldn't actually walk upstairs because you're kind of zapping. But that's neither here nor there. The point is this: they would, talk about how, oh, blah, blah, and it's like, don't you have to work? Like, the next week. I mean, there's
Right.
there's a certain part of, like, it's the reality based, and yes, I did use those because I think the reality based are reality.
Right.
Um, because there's only so far you can go,
Right.
and there's
Mhm.
It's
only so far
reality
you're gonna
adjacent.
want to go. It's reality adjacent. But then that's A. It just throws the acronym off. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's you've got to figure out that whole, like, as we talk about, it's like, when the dirty secret of martial arts, and I'm going to share it with you here for the people who haven't listened, is you're probably not going to fight a martial artist.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
You're going to, so when you hit somebody, or poke them in the eye, or shove them,
Hmm.
or bend a finger, or whatever.
Hmm.
Most people aren't used to that level of pain. So the upside of martial arts is, for most martial arts, I hope, is you tend to foster that level of discomfort. Like,
Mhm.
Right.
Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So
Yeah.
how you react, we talked about that, right?
Yeah.
About fighting the freeze a couple episodes ago.
That's right.
So, we get used to that a little bit. And so it's like that hurts, I'm going to train. Well, is that a good thing? Because you're just going to make it worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You
exactly. You're
know,
gonna you're gonna prolong your recovery because of that. And I'm
right.
going through that right now. Like I kind of got yelled at by my surgeon and my physical therapist a few weeks ago because I am treating my body like it's back to normal when it's not. It's still recovering. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I can walk. Yes, I can do things. My foot doesn't move the way that it used to, but I'm treating my body as if it didn't have an injury like it was
Right.
before the surgery. And they're like, you got to slow down. Your body is still recovering. um, I can't physically put a shoe on right now. My foot is too swollen to put an
Hmm.
actual shoe on. But that's not stopping me from getting out and doing lots of things. And so
So
I
you're saying you have a superfoot?
well,
Ah.
so it's funny you bring that up because I was gonna, you mentioned missing the mark and missing out on things. So for those that don't know, I have a first degree black belt under Bill Wallace, and I am right now eligible to test for my next rank under him.
Hmm.
But I can't stand, I can't move. And there was a test in April. There was a test last month that I was eligible to go for and test for my second degree
Yep.
black belt. And there's no way I
No.
could do that, right? There's
No.
absolutely no way. And so I definitely missed out on something that I could have done.
Yeah.
And obviously when my foot is healed enough and I'm comfortable, I'm absolutely eligible to test regardless. But everyone is getting older.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting, because with pandemic, we kind of had the same thing of like, if someone is ready, say you were ready, say you were in class every day up until that point, let's say, and foot, and then the next week, month, etc., you were eligible to test for promotion, right? As an instructor, like for me, like during like pandemic, like I promoted a couple of people during pandemic, and some people were, and I know instructors that said like, oh, I can't because we do throws and we do whatever,
Right.
and it's like but as if you and this would be good for any of the instructors that are out there watching, all two of you maybe possibly, that if you have a student that is hurt, is injured, cannot perform everything that you're supposed to be doing, do you still promote them? Like, I mean, if it's someone who's, got the heart, got the will, had the talent, had the ability, yada, yada, it was all lined up and was just coasting until the next testing period, as it were, do you promote them? Do you test them? That's, I mean,
Yeah.
for me,
Well,
every class is a test. I say every class is a test. So when I come up, it's for promotion. So if someone is eligible for promotion, if they're still, at that level, then they get promoted. But if their leg is in a cast, what does that look like? Or,
yeah.
how does that shake out?
Well, there's a little secret in the martial arts, and I'm sure most of the people watching this will know it, but uh testing is relatively arbitrary, right? I mean, like I don't uh, we've talked about this before, the value of your belt or the value of a black belt and things like that. Um it's all internal, right?
Sure.
It's all whatever you think it is, because oftentimes I've known many instructor where someone might be in a belt testing. They are they are either struggling with something in particular, or they're really nervous, or whatever the case might be, and the instructor gives them the belt anyway, right? And the instructor gives them the belt anyway because they know that they've done that technique in
Right.
class before, or it's simply the fact that this individual has been coming to class every single day for 3 years, and they should finally get their green belt, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
whatever the case might
Yeah.
be, And so I I think that there does need to be some some leeway for that kind of thing. Some leeway for somebody that might have a disability, for example, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
maybe they
Yeah.
broke their hip and they can't kick above their shoulder, or they can't kick above their waist. Well, you're gonna say, well, then go take Wing Chun now.
Yeah.
No, like, right? Like, you're gonna accommodate that and you're gonna
Well,
work.
and I think
You would hope.
there's so many variables to this that we would never, we
Mhm.
just don't have enough time because there's not enough hours in the day
Right.
to talk about all the variables. Like
Yeah.
a student has been coming all the time and he breaks his hand 2 days before the test.
Right.
We as the instructor know little Johnny was going to pass the test no matter what, because little Johnny does a great job. We knew he was going to
Right.
pass. Now he can't do the technique because his hand is in a cast, so you fail him or you don't let him test. Like, that's one. Or he broke his leg and his test isn't for 3 months, and so he does not come to class for 3 months. Like,
Right.
there's so many variables that you just,
Yeah.
we
I
couldn't
mean,
discuss them all, but you
my
have to
my
keep those things into
yeah.
consideration.
My biggest criteria for promoting someone is, um do they deserve it?
Sure.
Right? And so and 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 do they feel like they've earned it?
Yep. Yep.
Right? And
Yeah.
so
And that's probably so, like, I mean, Andrew, if you showed up to the test, like as an observer or whatever, and somebody said, "Hey, go put your gi on,"
Yeah.
and
right.
And I
whatever.
think that the difference there that we're talking about with, we're talking about students who come to your class all the time.
Right.
When
Yeah.
you are in the Superfoot system, you basically test and train with your instructor, and you show up at the test and go. I wasn't going to be able to work with my instructor at
Yeah.
all. So I
Right.
wouldn't have been able to do any of the techniques. And I would have shown up in front of Bill Superfoot Wallace and not been able to do anything. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't, even though I'm eligible, I wouldn't have felt like
Yes.
I had earned that rank.
That's
So
right.
Right.
I didn't even
Well,
put myself up for eligibility.
yeah. I mean, I've run into that before where people, have, you know, I'm up for promotion. I'm up for testing. It's like, no, you have your time and grade, or whatever, but you're
Mm-hmm.
not ready,
You're not ready.
or you're not, you're eligible, but you're not ready. That sort of thing and putting you in front of, yeah, a grandmaster or a high rank, whatever, or whatever it is. They don't have that relationship. And, we've talked about that before of like, who's more important? Is it your sensei? Is it your director? Is it the grandmaster? Is it, whatever? Who do you want to look better for? I had a test for Sandan, and I screwed it up. I like at the end, like I was training with a couple of guys that were also testing, and they were different. We different dojo, and I let their time. It's my fault, but the way they moved is not the way I moved, and it messed up my timing, and I screwed some stuff up. And when we got done, and you got promoted, and whatnot, and then on the way home, I told my sensei, I was like, "I'm sorry, I screwed up." Like and he like, I don't care. He says, "I know how you are."
Yep.
He goes,
Yeah.
"That was a bad day." You know,
Right.
we
Same,
didn't
Right.
explode. So
similar thing happened to me. I was in my testing for Shodan in my Shorin Ryu school, and I already had black belt in another school like this. And my thing is I love forms. I love forms and I love applications. And he, in front of the panel of guest instructors, he said, "Okay, do this form," and I said, "No problem." And in my head, forms are what I do. I love forms. And I got up, I did the first three moves, and I just blanked. Three moves,
yep.
and I froze.
I've been there.
I turned to the panel and I bowed and I said, "Sensei, may I start over?" And he said, "No,"
Ah.
Oh,
and said, "Do the next," and gave me the next form to do.
Yep.
And I still passed. I still,
mm,
got my next rank. I got my belt, and he said, "I know that you know how to do that form. You've done it a
right.
ton of times.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened."
Yeah.
A paper lock. Yeah.
Well, and I
Yep.
guess, since we're talking about getting older and things like that, I mean, I think the same would go for an older student. If you have somebody that's 70, who's testing for an advanced belt of some kind, you're going to accommodate that, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I think that what people somewhat tend to forget is that a martial arts school is not just a place where people come to learn kick, punch, hit, you know? There's community, there's mentoring, there's all kinds of reasons that people go. And just because the 70-year-old might not be able to uh, spar for as long or do some of the techniques or whatever the case might be, to me that's not a reason to not pass them. And I have seen more and more schools are doing this now, which I think is a really good idea. The instructor certification is separate from the belt ranking.
Mhm.
And so you can say, look, you can have a fourth degree black belt, but you're not certified to teach
Mm.
Yeah.
because it's a different skill set, you
Yep.
know? Um,
Teaching and doing are very
yeah,
different.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you could have somebody that may be an excellent, excellent teacher, um, but might be struggling to advance belts, right? You don't necessarily want to say, well, we're not going to give you that avenue to go down, or whatever the case might be. I know that in that system, they will they will certify like green belts and up as sort of junior instructors. But that's
Hmm.
again, that's a separate thing. right? They actually test you on whether or not you can teach, not
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
on the material, right? So
It,
I don't know. I've
yeah.
I've always liked that idea. Instead
It,
of just
That
saying your belt is your instructor certificate, you know?
oh yeah,
Absolutely.
man.
It's probably the number one reason that Whistlekick created what we're calling MATIC, which is our martial art teacher training certification.
Oh,
Teaching and doing are very different, and
yeah.
I challenge listeners or viewers, if you happen to be watching this, to name any hobby in the world where you get to a level and then all of a sudden you're asked to teach. And in martial arts, so many schools, and don't send everybody hate mail, I'm not saying every school, but we all know schools where boom, you get your black belt, now
Yeah.
you're expected to teach.
Right.
Yep.
It doesn't happen in any other hobby,
Yeah.
so why do we expect it to work in martial arts? And so
Yeah.
that's why we created martial art teacher training and certification, to teach how to teach. We're not teaching you how to kick and punch, we're teaching you
Right.
how to be a better teacher. And so I
Right.
couldn't agree more, Dan, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It,
there's a old have you ever heard of the Peter principle in business? It's
Mm.
essentially where you get promoted to your highest level of greatest incompetence, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Because it's and I've seen it in a lot of companies. I usually end up working for engineering companies and things like that, but it's where the best engineer gets promoted into management.
yeah.
And they're a phenomenal engineer, but a
But they're
terrible
not a
manager.
manager.
You
Yep.
Yeah.
know, it's a different set of skills. So I
Yeah. Well,
think
that's where they started that sort of emeritus pro, like in the IT world where they'll have, engineer emeritus or distinguished
right,
engineer or something like that. It's like
right.
someone who knows where all the bodies are buried and, can see the matrix or
A
whatever, but
fellowship.
should not be, running anybody. They can mentor people and they can
Right,
work with people, but they shouldn't
right.
be managing people for
Yeah.
sure. Well, one of the things I wanted to touch on, especially since we keep talking about being older, is just remembering stuff. Like, in class all the time. I mean, there'll be
Oh.
I my sensei used to do this all the time, where we'd go to somewhere and we go to a seminar or we go to a camp and they do something and he'd point at me and go, "Remember that." And then we get back to class like the weekend and it's just like, "What was that thing we talked about?" And then we'd have to try and hash it out. And like now I
Hmm.
find myself the same thing with my senior student going like, "Remember that,"
Remember
or like, "Go look that up,"
that.
or "What was that thing?" And okay, yeah, now I remember it.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's a senior moment, but it's a sensei moment is what sometimes we call it. But it's like, or like, I have never been a proponent of like the rigid, like, I know the order and the number and where I was standing when I learned this move.
Mm.
It's always,
Hmm.
my sensei was always, he calls it number next. He goes, "So what's number next?" It's just whatever it is in that drill, whatever the next one. And I turned that into a tactical sort of, like, I could never remember what number three is. And
Right.
and I was like, I don't care what the number is. I
No.
want to know what the technique is, and do you understand it, and can you
Hmm.
apply it? And it's your job as a junior person to remember it. And like, so now you're like, yeah, I gotta like look at the book or watch a video and go, okay, that's number. And but is it? And I'll do something, and what happened last night in class? My senior student said, like, why did you do that? And I was like, yeah, whatever the move was. And he goes, "You
Hmm.
didn't teach that to me." And I was like, "Oh, because that was the old way of doing it." Like they
Yeah.
changed it like 50, but I mean, it was just, that's why I kind
Yeah.
of flowed into it and did my
Yeah.
thing. And it wasn't wrong. It was just not current, or whatever you want to talk about. And is that anything, as senior martial artist yourself, that you're worried that you're not able to keep up, with the changes, with it's like, God darn, I'm going to do this. It's not. And for me, it's like the danger is I'm not going to do something just because it ain't the way I learned it. Or is it something like that's the better way of doing it? I should remember how to do that and incorporate it.
So first off, Dan, what I heard is he called us both old.
I didn't say,
I
what's
heard
that?
that too.
He said, as you guys as seniors, I,
You're a gray beard and you're bald. Hey, look at me.
I will.
I do get the senior discount at the movie theaters now, unfortunately.
So I will
When you go
say,
3.5 to 10.
for me, in terms of being forgetful, um, I think one of the best training tools that we as martial artists have in the modern era is this thing right here.
100%.
Like,
Absolutely.
it's convenient, it's easy to carry,
Hmm.
it goes everywhere with me. Um, I can be in the. I mean, it's not that I'm not to say I have this on me in the middle of class, but
Right.
it's there, it's close
Right.
by, so it's easy for me to be like, if I was teaching a class, hey, da 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 da, okay, you guys practice that, and then I have my, other people helping or whatever, and for me to go over to my phone and do a voice memo, hey, remember, blah 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 blah, or
Hmm.
whatever, or
Mhm.
we're working on a form, and I know that this student is going to be working on it at home. Go grab your phone, record. I'm going to have you video me doing it, like this right here is one of the
It
best
really is.
training tools that you could ever possibly have
Yeah.
in the modern day, in my
That's a
personal.
Oh yeah.
really good point. That's a really
Oh
good
yeah.
point.
Well,
And
that was
I
one of
think
the
too.
bonuses of Zoom classes, is because I record every class,
Hmm.
you
Yep.
know. And when I originally started doing it, I started recording classes before we started streaming them and stuff, because I would do stuff, and then the next class, hey, let's do that thing. I'm like, I don't remember what it was. So,
Yeah.
so it cuts both ways. It's both for the, and then I shot a video, and like one of my students, I kept telling him, you're not bringing your knee up high enough when you're kicking, and then blah 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 blah. And first time he saw a video of class of him doing
Clicks.
basics, and he's like, "You're right, I don't." I'm like, "Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, absolutely. That's a
No,
excellent,
that's a fantastic training tool. It really is.
yeah,
And I think hang on. Oh my goodness.
yeah, yeah. You're so young, yeah, whatever." Coughing up a lung over there. So while Dan's busy
I'm
hacking in,
Dying.
dying.
there he is.
I'm dying over here.
Catch the chicken, Rock. You ready?
Is he good?
I'm ready now.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I had my phone ready to call 911.
Right. Thank you. I forgot what I was going to say, but I have another thing. Um, I think one of the biggest benefits that you get from the martial arts is humility.
Well, not
Because
everyone gets it.
everyone
That's true.
should get it, like that is, yeah, well, that's a different story. But
Yep.
um, I think a lot of it comes back to that when, the initial conversation we had about, not being able to do techniques or knowing your own limitations and making sure that you accommodate for those. The first thing that you have to do is admit those limitations in the first place, right? Is to say, you know what? I am getting older. My knees don't work the same way they used to work. And so I do need my senior instructor to maybe do this technique and demonstrate it for me. And like, it's one of those things where, and even if it might be a demonstration, like I can do the technique, but I also know there's a risk involved in it, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So maybe I don't want to do it because my knees are already too messed up to begin
Mhm.
with, and I don't want to mess them up more.
Yeah.
Joe,
What's the ROI on? Yeah.
Joe can mess his up. Um,
Right.
so yeah, like I know that for me in my Wing Chun classes, for example, when the head instructor was around and we were doing chi sao or whatever, I would I would eagerly call him over. I'd be like, "Hey Chan, let's do 5 minutes of it, right?" And he was always a little bit hesitant. One because he was cycling through class and stuff like that, but I think too that in times like that, there's an unpredictable nature to students and what you're doing and all that stuff. And he was like 70. So, there's a reality to it. And I think that if you approach it with humility and say, I have limitations, I need to make sure I accommodate for those limitations so that my students can get the best training they can. I think that humility and sort of letting go of ego is probably the most
Mhm.
important thing you can do.
Right. Well, there that brings up an interesting topic, because we got like about another 12 minutes or tangent. Is actively, I encourage, actively, I tell all my students, I was like, yeah, I can't come to class, I'm hurt. I can't come to class, I'm sick. Well, if you're sick, dial in on Zoom and watch the class. Just sit and watch it. I can't come to work, I'm working, pop up the
Hmm.
Zoom, watch the class. Like I can't come to class because I'm hurt. And it's like, well, what can you do? So
Right.
and this is a good one for you, Andrew, is like, how did you work
How
it
did you
out because
accommodate?
so
Yeah.
you're still doing something because like for me I've got to do every day like I'm hitting the bag or I'm walking through kata even just walking through kata even
Yep.
if I'm just whipping a stick around like so what did some of the things you did to kind of keep yourself flowing a little
Involved.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's a lot that you can do, right? Obviously, the probably the part of our body that is the least utilized in training is our mind, right? Reading books,
For
watching
nature.
things,
Yeah.
keeping my brain active and thinking of martial arts is something I've done more so in the last 3 months than I've done in a really long time because I couldn't be active. But
Right.
it's also a matter of staying in touch with my instructor, getting videos, watching through things, watching videos of this is the form that I know I'm working on. Let me watch the video. Like, just going through. I mean, I can sit here in my chair right now and I can do a full form. Now, you won't see my kicks because of the camera, and I'm just, flicking my foot up, but like there's my
Right.
kick. Yeah, I can
Mhm.
turn and I can do my block and I can do my punch and I can turn around and go the other side. Like I still can do things. And I think the thing that got me thinking about working out in this like wheelie rolly chair is we on Whistlekick we interviewed a gentleman named Carlito Bonjoc who trained with Remy Precis and he's in a wheelchair, like phenomenal Filipino martial artist, and he is in a wheelchair and has been. Listen to the episode. Story's amazing, but people go to his seminars and learn so much, and he is limited in how he can move because he's in a wheelchair. And
Right.
Mhm.
why can't I still do martial arts in? I mean, this isn't a wheelchair. I have my leg. My legs are available to use and help me maneuver. And in a lot of ways, this is better than a wheelchair, quote unquote, better, right? So
Mhm.
I still can be active and move and go through things, even though
Yeah.
I'm not at the dojo with other students.
Right. And that's the important thing is that whole like it's not it's I can't, it's what can I do? Uh because at the end of the day, I mean, if you want to just dial it back to like it's a self-defense, thing, is yeah, you can still use your arms, you can still use your head, you can still use your body, you can go find what you can do. I mean, that's the whole thing with what with like BJJ was, uh he was teeny tiny and he was sick and so he took out all the stuff that was harder for him to do and made a more efficient art. Like, why can't anyone? It's almost like I can't because I can't do this in my art. Well, okay, then what can you do? So
Exactly.
that way you can say, if you're, you know, so we had like, when after I got my heart thing done, they went in through my wrist, and one of the things they said was like, don't, do anything to like do your wrist because basically, it's an artery that and I was like, so I was so like, they were like, don't, you can do karate and stuff if you want or whatever. But I was like, well, no, because we do a lot of stuff with our wrist.
Mm.
We're doing joint locks and I was like,
Yeah.
no, I was like, okay, well, I mean, I could just not use that one. All right, cool. Well, now I know that,
Right.
I'll start, and that's the mental exercise of like, well, what can I do if I can't use this hand? What
Yeah.
can I do if I can't use my legs? What can I do?
It's
And
it's an
that's the road you're walking down.
incredibly it's an
Pardon the pun.
incredibly under not appreciated, but it's something that's not taught a lot. And we, I think about that stuff a lot. And just a few weekends ago, we had a weekend training seminar called All In Weekend, and it's residential. People come, they stay on site, and tons of training, and then we have a chef on site, blah blah blah, whatever. But Jeremy and I talked about what are we going to teach. Well, I mean, this was only a couple of weeks ago. My foot, obviously, I mean, I can walk at this point. I could walk, but training is very limited, and so we taught the entire weekend on how to work through when you have a limitation, whether that limitation is you have a cane, you have to put weight on a cane because you can't use your leg, or you're holding a baby. How many people train in their
Yeah.
dojo where you're holding a baby and you have to defend
Hmm.
yourself? It's not as easy as it's a bag of groceries. Well, if someone attacks me and I have a bag of groceries, I'm just going to drop the bag of groceries, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I can't do that if it's a baby.
Yeah.
Or what if
Well,
I
that
get a
might,
we're not going to go
finagle
there.
issues.
Or what if
Who's got a
I'm a
baby?
college student? What if I'm a college student and I'm wearing a backpack and that backpack is completely full of books? Think
Mhm.
about that. Do your form in your brain right now. Do your kata, but you've got this heavy ass backpack on. It's gonna change how you move and how you
Absolutely.
manipulate your body. And I
Yeah.
think it's an underutilized thing to think about. And so we taught that the entire weekend and really worked through these different scenarios of how would you defend yourself if you're not at 100%.
Yeah.
Because
I,
I'm
I
not at
That's
100% right now.
right.
that's something I always kind of thought about doing, and now maybe I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Well, I remember Red Belt by famed martial artist David Mamet. Uh, he had the
The
thing where,
wheel.
like, they had the wheel, and it was like, okay,
Oh, right.
your
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
arm is
Right.
out, or whatever.
Right.
I do that in classes. Like at the beginning of the class, you bow in and go like, okay, you can't use your legs, and or
Right.
like, you are, your hand is broken or whatever, and you got to stick it in your belt, and you can't use that arm for the rest of class. Let's go, and then just have a regular class,
I
and
like
just
I like that idea. It's the only it makes me insane in that movie.
Oh, let's not even go there.
It
Let's
just
not even
makes
go
me
there.
crazy. It's the like
There's a,
that would
there's a
not work.
lot of things about that movie that really bother me. We did an episode on how to
Oh,
fight
did
that
you?
guy. Yeah, we did an episode on how would we have fought that guy. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff about that movie I'm not a fan of.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Any two fighters that are even marginally equal to each other, you tie one of their hands behind their back and they're gonna lose.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, there's just
yeah.
you can't take away an entire weapon and think that in any realm of possibility they would win.
Well, within the context of a competition, because I mean, when once you like open up the retaliation, or what you can use to defend yourself,
Yeah.
that changes it a little bit. I
Well,
mean,
sure. Yeah. That I mean, yes, if you picked up another weapon. But
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I can't
So
use this
anyway,
hand, but I can grab this freaking beer bottle and
I don't want to
or
ruin
whatever.
Red Belt for anybody because
Oh
I
yeah,
do love the
sorry.
movie. I do like the movie, but
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that premise is a little bit
It,
ridiculous.
they lost it at the end. But anyway, it's there was anyway. Yes, no spoilers. But yeah, I really like those. Although the how you fight people, I like that premise. But I think I remember we were talking about when it was going on. There was a some sort of contextual issue that I had of like, I don't know. I can't remember what it was. But
Well, no, and I
those are great
think
sequences. I like that.
yeah, and I think Andrew, along with what you were saying, the other thing is when when you do put it into real life context,
Hmm.
right? Like probably the the situation that I think is probably the worst kind of situation is it's late at night, you're in a parking garage, you're with your partner or child or whatever the case might be, and somebody slips into the elevator as the door is closing.
Yep.
Mm.
Now you're in a concealed space with someone that you potentially need to protect.
Hmm.
And now the dynamics are wild, right?
Exactly. And
Like,
we didn't do the elevator, but we did that exact scenario. You have your 5-year-old with you,
yes,
and you need to defend
protect
yourself,
them.
and that 5-year-old
Yeah,
is grabbing onto you because they're scared. So now you
right,
have to defend yourself and your child, but you
right.
also have this hindrance of someone grabbing onto you.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
I
it's a
That's
think
real scenario that could absolutely happen.
I personally think that those are the kinds of things that, again, if we have some sort of limitation, there's always creative ways to explore your martial arts.
Yep.
There's always creative ways to go in one particular direction or another. And Andrew, you said this, like you can read.
Yep.
Like you can read historical books about your martial arts. You can um, read what different artists and what they've gleaned from it. You can watch your favorite movies of your particular style. Like you can watch UFC fighters that are in your style, whatever. Like
Yep.
you can
Follow the really awesome podcasts.
fo- listen to
Absolutely.
podcasts of
I
super
listen to a
amazing martial
lot.
arts and
I
Dan.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and lots of martial arts podcasts.
Yeah.
Like not just the podcast that I do. Like I listen to Karate Cafe. I listen to conversations on karate. I listen to a lot of different other martial arts. There's a lot out there. So
Right.
absolutely.
And absolutely. Yeah, we've got a hard stop because I know Andrew's got to head
Yeah,
out.
I'm a
But
bad boy. I gotta get going soon.
that's okay. It's all right. It's it keeps us honest. But what we would like to hear is y'all out there that are listening or will be listening or seeing or will be seeing this. And by the way, thanks to Julio and Gus and Justin for
Yeah.
popping in. Appreciate it.
Nice to see Julio. Julio is a friend of mine. He actually came to All In Weekend the first
Oh,
couple of years we
Oh,
ran it, so
cool.
that was cool. Yeah,
oh,
I'm
nice.
glad we interviewed Gus a couple of weeks ago,
with
and
his
Yeah,
about his new book. Yeah,
yeah.
and that was a great
The
episode too.
I
um,
know. I
but
listen.
yeah, yeah, that's true. He popped on our
That's
first
right.
inaugural live. Um, but comment in the event chat about what you guys do to come on. It's again, yeah. I think it comes down to I can rather than I can't.
Yeah,
And
it does.
What
as long
can
as
you
you
do?
keep moving on. And so even as a senior martial artist, it's like I've still got to do stuff. I'm still gonna keep doing
Mhm.
stuff. Even though I feel like I'm missing a step or I can't quite keep up or whatever, it's still gonna keep moving because if you don't, that the water doesn't move, it gets stagnant, right? And so
Can I want to make sure to hit this one point because
go.
and I agree 100%. It's what you can do as an instructor. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I see a martial arts school that penalizes students for showing up late. And I want you to think about this for a moment. And we've probably all been in those schools before
Mm,
where you show up late and you have to sit down in the corner and wait and or you
right.
get chastised or whatever. As a teacher, I would always rather to have the student be there in class than not be there. And
Right.
if it means they miss the first 10 minutes, okay, great. That meant I had that
At least
student
you're
for
there.
50 minutes instead of 60,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And if you have a culture in your school where you're penalizing students for showing up late, that student is on their way to class. They're driving. Oh, you know what?
They hit traffic,
I'm gonna be 5 minutes late. You know what? I'm just not gonna go to
and
class
just turn
because
around.
I'm gonna get in trouble. I would
Yeah.
rather the student be late
Yeah.
and be there because it's what they can do. The same is true when you're injured. If if you have a broken arm
Hmm.
and you can't walk or whatever, you can still be in class and get something from it. The thing that made it difficult for me is I couldn't drive, so I
Yeah,
couldn't actually go to class, and
Right.
there are no online versions for me. So, but
yeah,
I think that's a big sticking point that I want instructors to hear, and
Yeah.
it's such a huge pet peeve of mine. Don't make it a punishment if someone is late for class because everybody goes through stuff. Now,
Yep.
if they're late for class 6 classes in a row, maybe there's a discussion with them privately, like, "Hey, what's going on? Is there a problem? Like, what can we do to help?" But man, I hate that so much, and I'm sorry. I'm going to jump off my soapbox now.
Yeah. No, it's a good soapbox to be on.
it is,
Um,
isn't it? Well, hey, Andrew Adams, thank you so much for being our guest
yeah.
instructor today. This is a good chit chat. Everybody who signed in. Hey, guys, don't forget to send in your mugs if you want some Karate Cafe watching me drink out of your mug from your dojo. Uh,
Do we have an
and
address for them to send it, or are they just supposed to send it to Santa
no,
Claus?
they're supposed to DM me, and then I'll send them. I'm just gonna throw my
Oh,
address out here in the middle of the
okay. Well, you say
three
DM
people that
me
are.
for my
Well,
address so I can get your
DM,
coffee
DM me,
cup.
hit me up, yo, or whatever
Hit
the
me
kids
up.
say.
That's
Like
right.
and subscribe, or
I don't know if they say hit me up, yo, but
I'm sure the kids are saying that. The kids.
They do now.
Dear.
Anyway, but hey, thank you all.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Andrew.
much, guys.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
Thanks. Tell
Super fun
Jeremy
to
we
have
said
you on.
hey, and thanks, Jeremy, for letting you come hang out with us for a little bit.
That's right.
And we'll talk to you all again very soon.
Bye, everybody.